I was 16 years old when I went camping with my mom in the coastal mountains of Oregon. I'd never been to Oregon before and I could barely contain my excitement on the ride there about the breathtaking views I was hoping to see. When we arrived, we were the only campers at the campsite, which was at the top of a hill about a 25-minute drive from the main road. We had an amazing fun-filled day full of hiking, swimming, and fishing. As we settled in for the evening, we made a campfire and roasted marshmallows and s'mores, which were my absolute favorite. Just as we were getting ready for bed, a truck full of men blasting country music drove up the hill towards our campsite. They parked their truck near our campsite and got out. Obviously drunk, they were talking and laughing loudly. My mom and I watched them from our tent. One of the men walked over to our tent and knocked on the door. My mom opened the tent flap just a few inches and the man asked if he could use our phone. My mom said no. Suddenly, the stranger started to get angry. He yelled at my mom and called her awful names. My mom was scared, I was terrified and hiding under my sleeping bag, but she stood her ground. Firmly and confidently, she told the man to leave us alone or we would be calling the police. The man eventually gave up and walked back to his truck. He and his friends drove away, and we were left alone again. We went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what just happened and I was afraid that they would come back. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. I sat up in my tent and listened. The footsteps were coming from outside our tent. I put my hand over my own mouth in an attempt to silence my whimpering. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, but I was afraid that would make things worse. I looked over at my mom. She was sitting up in her sleeping bag. She was wide awake and she looked scared. The footsteps stopped right outside our tent. We held our breath and waited. After a few minutes, we heard the footsteps start to walk away. We waited until we were sure they were gone before we got out of our tent. We went outside and looked around. We didn't see anyone. We didn't know what had happened, but we were both relieved to see that we were alone again. The next morning, we packed up our campsite and drove home. I was glad to be home, but I was still scared. I'm grateful to my mom for being so brave. She stood up to the men and protected me. I don't know what I would have done if she hadn't been there. I'm still scared of camping, but I'm not going to let that stop me from enjoying the outdoors. I'm just going to be more careful and aware of my surroundings.